Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation by our two FOGAH pre-program summer conservation interns. We have a few stragglers who are still coming in, so we're going to just give it about 2 to 3 more minutes, just to give people some time to sign on or to come in person. Kayla, are you aware of anyone else we're waiting on?
No.
All right, so we may as well get started. So thank you very much for joining and being here today. We have been very fortunate to have our two interns with us for the past 3 months, Charlotte Starnes and Danis Gonsowski. They will be presenting on some of the work that they've done during their internship with us and the projects they've worked on. We've really appreciated having them with us here and all their hard work and contributions to the archives. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the FOGAH board and their programming for supporting our conservation internship program and how they are supplying the funds for us to be able to have interns every year. And we look forward to their continued support. So I am going to throw it over to the two of them and they'll be presenting on their internship. If you have any questions, you can either put it in the chat or you can wait until the end and come off mute to ask them. Thank you very much and please enjoy their presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Charlotte, this is Dani. Today we're going to talk about the 2021 Friends of the Georgia Archives History Conservation Internship Experience. So thank you for coming today, all of you online and who actually showed up today for walking downstairs. Thank you, to listen to what we've been up to for the last 12 weeks. A brief outline of what we're going to do today, to talk about today. Both Dani and I will briefly touch on the importance of internships for pre-program conservation students like us. And we're also going to talk about the particulars of why this internship was so important and awesome. And then we will talk to you about all of the things that we've learned and then how we applied the skills and some of the concepts that we learned to some of the projects that we were involved in. But first, we will each introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit more about where we came from. All right. Okay. So I'm Charlotte Starnes. I'm from Tallahassee, Florida, though I was actually born here in Atlanta. I moved when I was 2, so I don't know if you can actually call me a local. Like most conservators, my background is, or aspiring conservators and conservators, my background is all over the place. I originally intended to work in international development. I earned a BA in International Relations and Global Affairs from Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I really enjoyed working with young kids. As you can see from some of the pictures, I did an internship in India, and I also had wonderful opportunities to travel to a number of other places and work in schools and orphanages and really just like, I guess I just played with the kids really, but I really enjoyed it. It never felt like work. But even though that was incredibly rewarding, unfortunately the recession hit. I am a bit older, and I was unable to maintain the momentum of working in that career. So I completely flipped the coin, and from 2012 to 2018, I worked on private yachts. That was an experience in itself, but for the sake of this internship and my career in conservation, I think the most important was it was where I met my first real life conservator in the wild. And it was the field of conservation instantly piqued my interest. And so I knew that when I decided to leave the industry, I would work to become a conservator. So I just graduated this last spring from FSU with another BA. My parents are so proud in art history. And of course, I took all the organic chemistry and studio art courses on top of that, and had the great fortune to come here and continue to learn and build skills and find myself down really fascinating rabbit holes of different types of material as conservators do. So coming into conservation, I had a lot of interest in painting initially because I've always grown up painting. But I do believe that this internship has sort of transitioned me into, I know Sigourney and Tracy will be excited to hear this, I've gotten really into paper and books materials, also photographs. So the experience has definitely sort of shifted my my desires and goals. So, yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danis Gonsowski, and just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, pictured here in glorious Technicolor. I have a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Japanese Studies from the University of Arizona in Tucson. My career just previous to me pursuing conservation as a career was as a professional actor, if one can believe it. And I have a great interest currently in textile and costume conservation, which I actually found out was even a possibility of a career about a little over 2.5 years ago. In the most 21st century way possible, I saw a YouTube video. It was actually a YouTube video from the Metropolitan Museum of Art talking about, with one of their conservators talking about conserving some of Iris van Herpen's beautiful constructed costumes. But even with my interest in textile and costume conservation, I'm also extremely interested in learning about other areas and specialties of conservation. And in particular, book and paper, actually, you can call it kissing cousins to textile conservation. There's a lot of products and techniques and tools that kind of cross between the two. So I was extremely excited to be able to engage in the opportunity to be at the Georgia Archives. So to talk about conservation in general very quickly, as well as internships in conservation and why they're so important. Just a quick definition, conservation is the preservation of material cultural heritage through the use of examination, documentation, treatment, and prevention. If you want a more in-depth and broader look at the world of conservation, may we suggest you check out last year's interns presentations on the Georgia Archives YouTube channel for more information. They do a really good job doing a more in-depth overview. There are many roads into conservation. For example, one can be bench trained, basically get on the job training in the techniques and the philosophy of conservation. But a major roadway in is going to a graduate program for art conservation. Currently, there's only 4 graduate programs of, in art conservation in the United States. There's another one in Canada. Of course, there's programs in other places in the world as well. And all 4 of the programs either outright require or highly suggest having pre-programmed conservation experience, usually in the form of internships. Normally, it can be rather difficult to simply find these internship opportunities as well as to get accepted into an internship program. And these challenges have only been compounded due to the COVID pandemic and the restrictions that are necessary, but that have been imposed due to that. Another difficulty is also that conservation tends to be concentrated on the 2 coasts of the United States, and in particular in the Northeast. So geographical location can be a challenge as well. That's why it's so important, and we are so appreciative that the Georgia Archives is dedicated to helping to provide those conservation internship opportunities to those who would otherwise have access to very few available resources. For example, myself, in Arizona, there's maybe 1 or 2 proper conservation labs that I can even think of in the entire state. And either they don't offer internship opportunities or it's incredibly challenging. You have to meet particular standards, such as be a student of the college that's associated with. So in particular, myself, and I'm sure as well Charlotte, really appreciate that the Georgia Archives prioritizes providing those opportunities to people.
So why is this internship important and absolutely incredible? Experience working in a conservation lab. So conservation is both academic, but it's also really hands-on, sort of skill, craft intensive. And so you need school, but yes, you need to learn the craft, so to speak. So you need to really experience working in a lab. And this is for several reasons. So you get to encounter real life conservators, in our case, being around Tracy and Sigourney, watching them in their element, watching them work on their own projects, also helping us with ours. Sigourney worked on the few of the projects that I know she worked on while we were in the lab this last 12 weeks. She worked on an 18th century parchment, which she finally got done and encased, and she also worked on a Bible for the Bremen Jewish Heritage Museum, so we got to watch her do those. Tracy has been working on various and sundry maps with, one of them had 1,000 pieces that we watched her meticulously put together. So just being around them while they're working is in and of itself a really great experience. But also we as interns personally got the opportunity to become comfortable with the lab setting. So that means becoming comfortable with the different tools and terminology and equipments that we are working with in a lab. And so here it's predominantly books and paper conservation tools. So the bone tool is the best friend of a books and paper conservator. Also learning the different types of papers that we use in conservation, like Japanese papers, the types of brushes. I have Sigourney's favorite Japanese brushes, 1, 2, and 3 hanging up, scalpels, and just those types of tools, etc. Also, chemistry and the knowledge of chemical interactions and the forces that propel them is a really important facet of conservation. Most people who have done a general chemistry course or an organic chemistry course know that we have this expectation that if you follow all the rules and the right amounts, that the lab is going to go as you expect it to, and the results are going to be exactly as you expect it to. But real life doesn't work that way. And so you can have the perfect amounts of things, but you really need to kind of get used to handling different chemicals. So in conservation, that's a lot of solvents and adhesives. And we also got to make this other really weird stuff called gelin, which is a fancy high molecular weight polysaccharide that allows conservators to work more gently or more controlled with water using capillary forces. So it's also really fun to play with because it's kind of goopy and weird. Another important facet of this internship is just general awareness of the different materials, how to handle them, and developing an eye for their behaviors and how they should feel. And so that's been to have that hands-on experience is really, really important. And that's why this internship is really important for us who want to go into conservation.
So now we're going to start getting into specifically what we learned, the skills we learned, how we grew as conservatives and people, and all that we accomplished in the 12 weeks since we've been here. So one aspect of this internship that I really enjoyed and I really appreciated was Journal Club. For about 8 weeks during the course of the internship, one of us would choose a journal article on whatever kind of subject related to conservation we wanted, and then we would all read it and get together to discuss it. And as you can see, even just by the titles, it ranged in subject matter quite broadly. It went all the way from discussing specific types of treatments on specific objects, such as with Alfred Stieglitz's palladium photographs and their treatment by Edward Staken, all the way to issues of sustainability with articles such as Slow Conservation and Sustainability in Conservation, Saving Our Heritage and Our Planet, both of which actually were chosen by Brooke, the undergrad student that was with us for a couple of months and who was a joy to work with and interact with, all the way to issues of philosophy and ethics with articles such as The Practice of Looking in Paper Conservation. So I thought this just added a nice extra layer and context for what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how maybe it should be done, or at least different ways that people do it. So it was very, very interesting, and that's an aspect of the internship that I particularly appreciated.
So along with journal club discussions, we also completed a FEMA course that introduced us to the incident command system that goes along with the emergency management systems at local, state, and even federal levels. We also learned that Sigourney has an active role in the Emergency Support Function 11, which organizes and coordinates federal support for the protection of the nation's agricultural and natural and cultural resources during national emergencies. Why we're lumped in with agriculture, I have no idea, but it's great introduction to understanding a conservator's broader role in the community outside of the lab and protecting cultural heritage. So in this role, she does a lot of things like organizing fire training for staff, and often will coordinate training with other institutions under the University System of Georgia, like the umbrella of the all the different places. In the photo at the top, you can see that we got to participate in the fire safety and training course that we all went to at the Georgia Records Center, which was followed by a titillating tour of the very mysterious building. Another example of conservation in the community here at the Georgia Archives is their role in education. So the Georgia here, Sigourney and Tracy are avid educators. I mean, on their YouTube page, you can see a lot of the courses and workshops that they do. They also do, this summer, we've done a conservation series, which has been really interesting. So here, recently, we were able to help out with the workshop for the Daughters of the American Revolution, where Sigourney lectured on the do's and don'ts for caring for your family Bibles. As well, it was also a photo documentation event for them to document the marriages, the births, the deaths for the Daughters of the American Revolution. So active roles in the community and in safety are also part of the gig, I guess.
So one important aspect of conservation that we got firsthand experience with is preventive conservation and environmental monitoring. A quick definition of what preventive conservation is that it is any measure that prevents damage from occurring in the first place or reduces the potential for damage. So although more active hands-on treatments are of course important for objects that have deteriorated or been damaged in some way, preventive conservation is a way to prevent that from happening in the first place if possible, which helps to greatly expand the lifespan of said objects. We got firsthand experience in this due to issues with the desiccant wheels ceasing to function just before we got here and the internship started. And on top of that, the heating coils also went out. So this caused issues particularly in regulating the relative humidity levels within the building. There was also a need for constant monitoring of the relative humidity and temperature using tools such as what's pictured here. There's two of them there. They're called hobos. And you could see that it's detecting both the temperature and then that bottom number is the relative humidity. And as you could also see, we were able to maintain both the temperature and the relative humidity in the proper range for keeping books and paper and those types of objects. This was done through the use of portable dehumidification units in areas that hold original materials, as well as monitoring the calibration of the materials or the instruments that detect temperature and humidity levels, because it's extremely important that we get accurate readings to ensure that we're keeping, again, the temperature and the relative humidity in the proper range to keep paper happy. So. And then another thing that we got to participate in, actually pretty much the first thing, I think maybe day 2 we started in on this, was bookbinding. So let me tell you a little bit about the wonderful world of bookbinding. Of course, it has a history that's thousands of years old with multiple different binding methods from all over the world. We were a little bit more limited in which of those methods we did. We only had so much time. Each of us made 3 books. They were hardcover books. And the technique that we used for all of them were we took sections called signatures, sections of paper called signatures, and attached them together by a method called sewing through the fold, in which holes are made in the folded area of the signature, and then you pass thread through to connect them using either cords or tapes. The picture at the top and the bottom right, you could see the tapes method being used, and that aids in helping to connect the signatures together and ensuring a good strong hold between them to make a good strong book. We made 2 different covers for our books. The first is what's called a full cloth binding. That's generally the more common one you'll see in kind of those hardcover style books, where the whole cover and spine is covered in book cloth. We also were able to make a book in quarter binding, where only the spine is covered in book cloth and the rest of the front and back covers is covered in a paper. We were able to decorate a beautiful paper and use that for covering our books. Bookbinding also involves a lot of special terminology, something that we're trying to still get a handle on. There's a lot to learn, even just in this one aspect. Every part of the book has its own terminology and name and term, but it also helps on the conservation end of things because you're more accurately able to describe what is going on with the book, what kind of damage happened with the book, and then what steps you took to help address those areas of concern.
So some other first skills we needed to learn were basic skills for books and paper conservators. So Sigourney and Tracy sort of created these kits for us to learn these techniques first on, I guess, practice materials before we got to get our hands dirty with some original materials. And some of these kits include, well, first and foremost, identifying different types of paper and materials. We had these little folders with little swatches of papers in it, and we had to try and guess what they were. Still working on that one. A couple of other kits that we learned were surface dirt and how to clean it. I think they had more fun making those kits than we did cleaning them. But we also, I think an important part of that was looking under the microscope to see if we actually damaged the paper cleaning it, because sometimes you can over clean things. Then Danny and I got to make some original artwork. You can see in picture 3, my lovely drawing from the Nuremberg Chronicle. And then we got to destroy each other's artwork and learn how to do tear repairs with adhesive and Japanese paper, but also to humidify and flatten it. So in that picture, that's a little humidification chamber that we've sort of assembled. And then next was the wide world of pressure sensitive tape removal, which I had no idea how extensive that is. All the different types of adhesives that are used in tapes. In picture 4, those are water soluble adhesives, which tend to also be very smelly when you remove them. And so my favorite was the backing removal, because you have an actual visual reference for how hard you've worked. It's the pile of backing that you make while you pull it off. So that's in picture 5. We also did the Conservation Olympics, where we ran around the lab carrying wet objects, trying not to damage them. In picture 7, you can see our attempts at mold remediation. Those are the lovely MARTA documents, so no worries, Atlanta, they are all safe and clean. And then one of the harder things, I think, was color matching with Japanese paper, paint drying on paper and trying to match it to other types of materials was very interesting and challenging, and you'll see some of the struggles I had with that later on. We also made some enclosures, and I think just the general rhythm and mindset of working in the conservation lab before we got to work on some of the larger projects, because a backing removal can take days. So you'll see some of the other very tedious things we've been up to, so just learning how to settle in. And then, of course, examination and treatment reports, which Danny will also talk about when we talk about our larger project. So once we learned those skills, we got to encounter the Tyranno Conservator Rex, actually Regina, because she is a queen. We had to choose 2 of our lovely books that we spent so much time making and offer them up for sacrifice. I think Sigourney really enjoyed damaging them so that we could put them back together again. At the top, you can see 2 of the books that she brutally attacked. I think the one on the top right, she actually stomped on. And then you can see in the middle picture sort of the book in process. The toned Japanese paper is up at the kind of the top left corner of that middle picture. And I'm doing a tear repair under weights. And then at the bottom, you can see we put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Not the same as before, but still a book and still workable. So all this practice on our books and in our kits and the bookmaking prepared us for original materials. So we actually started to work on some of the materials here at the Georgia Archives. And so we're going to talk about some of our projects now.
So the first of my projects that I wanted to talk about is one of the reference books, the 1910 U.S. Census of Clayton County, Georgia. Sounds like a real page turner. It's a soft cover book with bound in a method called perfect binding, which if anybody owns or has read a paperback book, That's perfect binding. And what that is individual sheets of paper that are adhered together using adhesive along the spine to make the text block. And then along the spine, it's adhered, again, using adhesive to the cover. With this book, the main issues were delamination of the cardstock cover, since cardstock is actually created with thinner layers of paper that are adhered together to create a thicker, stiffer material, as well as some detached pages. So I re-adhered the loose pages using a half and half blend of EVA, which is ethyl vinyl acetate, which is essentially white school glue. Mix that with a 2% methyl cellulose, which is a water-soluble adhesive that can get kind of gloopy, especially at higher percentages. And mixing it meant that the EVA would not dry as quickly, so you have a little bit more time to work with the materials and adjust if needed. And I was able to relaminate the cardstock layers by using wheat starch paste in between the layers, which was incredibly satisfying. But not only did it make it look better aesthetically, it actually helped to strengthen the weak and worn areas of the cover, which, I mean, that's why they started getting soft and delaminating in the first place. Some pictures here. On the left is the before, on the right is the after. You can see, especially at the top of the spine, that bottom right corner, although other corners and even edges of the cardstock cover were starting to delaminate, how they're curling and just kind of worn away, how it came together very nicely on the right. Yeah, and it helped strengthen those areas and hopefully will be used for many more years to come in the reference library. The second of my projects, and sort of more of an example of an issue that I encountered that I had to quickly pivot to be able to address, is with the general highway maps for Baker County and Atkinson County. The initial issues with the maps were things like creases, tears, and curled edges. They were longer maps, and the short edges were curled due to having previously been rolled up. So to flatten those curled edges, I did a process called humidification and flattening, and initially did that using a water pen to directly apply the water to the paper, but unbeknownst to me, the paper was quite sensitive to moisture and instantly wrinkled up. Even after drying, the whole surface was wrinkly, crinkly, as it were. So I had to figure out quickly a new method for a more gentle humidification process due to the paper sensitivity to water. And what you see pictured here is the method that I came up with, and that was to use various scrap pieces of Mylar that we had laying around, to cover any area of the map that did not absolutely need to be humidified to prevent it from getting that wrinkled texture. And I then applied the deionized water using a misting spray bottle so that the mist went up into the air and then would gently fall down onto the paper so that not as much water was needed to get it humidified. And you could also see just that little piece of Mylar kind of sticking out past the right edge of the bottom map. And that was because another issue that I had to pay very close attention to was there were red pen marks on the back of that map that on testing for solubility was highly soluble in water. And so if that had gotten wet, it would have bled and run and caused red dye essentially to leak all over the map. But protecting it with the skinny piece of Mylar was enough to keep it dry, and luckily it didn't get wet and run. And then the last personal project that I wanted to talk about is another reference book called Bible and Genealogical Records. It's a book that I actually pretty much just got done yesterday. There's a couple of fine-tuned things that I need to do today to it, but I was able to get it done before I left, which is a good thing. So I termed it the Book of 1,000 Papers, which I'll get more into in just a second. So this is a book that was compiled between 1939 and 1941 by the James Edward Oglethorpe chapter of the Daughters of the American Colonists. And what it is it's actually records from their family Bibles, from tombstones and graveyards, from other records that they have of their family history and their genealogy, which was pretty fascinating. But what it is that it appears that the different members of that chapter individually typed up their records on whatever paper they had with their typewriter, and contributed it to this one volume, which was then bound together using a binding method called oversewing, in which you set the stack of the individual papers together and then pierce through the stack of the individual papers and sew through that. So the initial issue that came to us was a detached spine, which it's a bit difficult to see in this picture. It's because it was along the back edge of the spine that had just simply worn away with use, and thus you could completely flap it open. But upon examining throughout the book, there were tears and paper fracturing throughout almost the entirety of the book. And so I had to first address that issue. But in addressing that issue, I found that there were just multiple different types of paper, each with their own handling considerations. It ranged anywhere from paper that was practically as thin as tissue paper, a type called onion skin, all the way up to paper that reminded me more of almost like a slightly thinner construction paper in both feel and the weight of it, and just all kinds of paper in between, all different colors. Here you can get kind of an idea of all the beautiful layers of just the different papers that exist in that book, and just sort of the condition of them as well. And here are some particular examples I wanted to draw attention to. The left picture and the picture on the upper right are both examples of that thinner onion skin, but they're also examples of the fact that some of the pages are actually smaller pieces of paper that they adhere together and then cut down to make basically the full book length of paper. In the bottom right, they didn't even bother to do that. That's the entirety of page 150, is that one little strip. But it was typed up and bound together with all the rest of the papers. So that kind of gives an idea of just the wide range of paper situations, I guess you can describe them as well as the types of paper that I had to deal with in helping to conserve this book.
So I'll talk about some of the projects I encountered and did. So this project was actually a personal project. I brought 2 family books with me that have been sort of passed down from my grandmother. So they're not super fancy. I think I wanted to work on these before I got to touch other people's stuff because it was personal. So I was like, if I mess it up, it's okay. But so this project, due to its personal nature, was an interesting exercise in decision making for me. How far does the treatment really need to go? How far did I want it to go? This book is older, it is unique, but I also wanted to be able to still use it and read it. So I approached this book with a sort of with intentions of doing less invasive treatments. I really just wanted to protect the spine and have it still be readable because we still read all the old books at home. So as you can see, it had a damaged spine. The front cover board was warped. In the before picture, you can actually see it lifting in the back a little bit. There was leather deterioration. It's a very thin leather, and it was sort of like flaking off. It did have, I wrote criminal surface dirt accumulation. It was very, very dirty. But for the most part, the text block and the mull that hold the book together and sort of protect the book itself were all intact. So I originally surface cleaned it with cotton buds. You can see in the bottom middle picture how dirty some of those cotton buds got. I steered clear of that's an actual albumin print that's on the book, so that's pretty neat. I then consolidated the leather with Klucel G, which is a weird adhesive that you mix with, I think we mixed it with isopropyl alcohol, and it's sort of jelly and sloppy, but what it does is it just sort of sticks all the leather to itself. I then created an infill of Permalife conservation grade paper to fill the loss of the spine board rather than just taking it off and making a whole new spine board. And then I attempted to color match the marbling on the leather with some success. Let's just say I've gotten better better at gauging color matching with Japanese paper as it goes, so this isn't my best work. But I do like that I was able to get some of the marbling effects. I tried everything from like water in a pan to just, you know, Jackson Pollock. Like it was really fun. But so then I used that to sort of cover the new spine that I had made. But that was a little tricky with the warped cover board. So you can see sort of the before, or these are both the after photos. So the color matching worked better on the back side than it did the front side. But and then I used a special leather conditioner and wax polish to sort of like seal it all in. And I think Danny will agree that our foray into bookmaking and book conservation and repair has sort of opened our eyes into all the ways books have unique little faults and bizarre ways that they can get damaged, and how this provides sort of like fiddly situations to puzzle out like each individual. You can't approach everything the same way. So that was the first project that I engaged with. Here we go. So a growing interest of mine throughout this internship has been the development of prints and the different types of prints and their processes. And I've had great exposure to some of these different types of media. Our larger project, which we'll touch on in a minute, is a really cool lithograph. We've encountered more contemporary inkjet prints with the Atkinson County maps, like the ones that Danny spoke about in one of his projects. The 1926 Oconee map, so the lovely blue friend up there, is a map for the Georgia Railway and Power Company, and it is a blueprint, which is a type of cyanotype, which is uniquely kind of a type of photographic process. It's essentially a reproduction of like a technical drawing using a contact print process on light-sensitive sheets with a like photosensitive ferric compound. Large concerns with blueprints, because you have to approach them very differently to the way you would approach a regular printed map, are light exposure, remembering buffered environments are actually bad for blueprints, which is sort of counterintuitive to some of the other paper materials that we worked with. They're usually very brittle and lack support, so being stored flat is optimal. This one was not stored flat, it was stored folded. And so also remembering to wash your hands after you handle it, because cyano is cyanide, so there's a part of it that's sort of not good for you if you ingest it. So fortunately for me, I was just simply addressing the tears and fractures. There wasn't any like super serious damage to the map itself. So yes, addressing the tears and fractures largely along the fold lines. So flattening it with local applications of DI water and placing it under weights. And so you can see in the far left, like before photo, those two photos are sort of highlighting some of the tears. And then on the far right, you can see they've sort of faded into the map themselves. So, and then we encapsulated it. And so now he's all protected. The next project or object I was able to work with was a beautiful hand-drawn map from 1868 of Banks County. It was written with, we believe, iron gall ink. It was lined with a cloth backing, so like a back cloth or linen lining. We noticed that there was some smudging on some of the color media, so we believe that maybe it was previously treated. And also a clue for that was that it was encapsulated in a, I'm assuming maybe a Mylar case with double-sided tape, which is one of the reasons we also needed to rehome it. Yes, so as I mentioned, there's some pigmented like color media on there, and then the paper itself was actually kind of slightly brittle. So approaching this, first we did I got to do a number of tests, which was fun. So in that far left, the far left is the map before we took it out of the Mylar. The picture just up from that is doing some of the solubility testing. You can see a little droplet of water on the color media, but we tested all the media for solubility. I did DI water, acetone, ethanol, and isopropanol. And luckily for me, it was not soluble. It was very likely insoluble in water. So we knew that we were probably going to have to give it a bath, so that was good news for me. But I did do some, in the other testing, did see that it was actually some of the color media was very soluble in ethanol, which we believed it might have been varnished before, and they might have taken it off with that. So, which might have been reason why they stopped some of the treatments, because some of the colors started to smush a little. We got to test for iron gall ink. More testing for the stability of the iron gall ink. It did prove stable, so we didn't need to treat it. But the treatment of unstable iron gall ink is pretty finicky. I would love to see that one day, how to do that, because in the history of iron gall ink, everything about iron gall ink was one of the rabbit holes that I got to go down. If you ever feel so inclined, it's really fascinating. So then I got to test some of the pH to test for the acidity of the paper, because paper slowly becomes more acidic, which helps it degrade and become more brittle. And so I removed the linen backing and tested the backing actually for the pH. And you can see the backing removal and all of the proof of my hard work in as I love that, in the little jars. But so I tested that pH, and it was fairly acidic. It was like 4.9, which is kind of not good. So we decided we were going to wash it. And so the next step, I went ahead and took some swabs and removed some of the rest of the adhesive off of the back before we washed it in pH adjusted water. And then we gave it a buffer bath as well. And then you can see a picture of Sigourney and I lining it with some of her favorite Japanese brushes. And so, let's see, and medium weight Japanese tissue. And then we promptly put the map under felts and weights so that he could dry. He's still currently drying. Hopefully he'll be dry by the end of the week, and we can encapsulate him. So I really enjoyed how these two different projects were very technically different, even though they're kind of the same thing. They're both maps. In the different aspects of their making, I got to learn that. And all of the different things that you need to consider while you're approaching these projects. So now Danny and I will both talk about the state map of Georgia from 1847 that we are currently still working on.
So just to give a little bit of background information on the map, as well as the condition it initially came to us in. It is a map of the state of Georgia dated 1847. It is quite large. It's 60 inches tall by 54 inches wide, or 5 feet by 4.5 feet. It was contracted to us for treatment from the Thomaston Upson Archives in Thomaston, Georgia, in Upson County. And the initial condition it came to us in, there were a whole host of issues. There was creasing of the paper medium of the map, abrasion all over its face that you can kind of see just all over. Cockling, which is when a piece of paper has been rolled up and then it just doesn't lie flat anymore. So it's sort of that wavy texture that you can kind of see going across it. There was just straight up physical damage, things like burns and missing chunks and punch through areas, which I'll highlight more in a little bit. There was tape residue from the use of tape on the map, darkened varnish over the whole face of it, which is quite evident by looking at it as well. There were tide lines, which is more evident on the right, although it does exist on the left side as well. And that's when a piece of paper is partially exposed to water, so that through capillary action, the water moves up the paper and it pushes along with it dirt, grime, in this case, probably some of the varnish. And then when it dries, you see that sort of darker edge, which marks how far up the water moved up into the paper, as well as missing portions of the map. You can see it more obviously on the left side of the map, that kind of just all the way straight down, just big chunks are missing. Although on all four sides and in some areas in the middle of the map, there are areas missing as well. Working on this map was our first opportunity to write a condition report and a treatment plan for an object, which was exciting. And the method taught to us by Sigourney for the condition assessment is to go from the structural to the chemical and then to the media, looking at those aspects of whatever object you're looking at. So that the structural would be things like the physical damage, tears, creases, the cockling, that sort of thing. The chemical would be things like the darkened varnish or any stains that exist on the map. And then the media is what is on the paper, things that are printed, things that are written in whatever method they were. So in this case, it would be the printing of the map and the pictures and words on it, as well as some writing on it with things like graphite pencil that also are on the map is included in media. So here is a little bit more detail of the map, at least the sides of it. The picture on the left, you can get a really good idea of just how much of the left side is missing. And then on the right, you get a better view of the tide lines, as well as some missing sections of the right side as well, and the bottom. And here are sort of zooming in on some of the more particular issues. The upper left picture is a picture of a burn mark that is just right in the middle of the map. We don't know how it got there, but you could see that it caused a much darker area of the map right in the middle. On the bottom left is what we think might be a doorknob having smashed into it, maybe, but we're not entirely sure. Some kind of physical trauma occurred to this map to cause this particular pattern. It sort of created two circle type areas. The left one is still connected to the map, mostly along the top, but that right circle, almost a perfect circle, the only way it's staying on there is that it still attached to the textile backing of the map. It's actually completely detached from the paper around it. So it's essentially a free-floating piece, only attached by the textile backing of the map. The photo on the right is some of that tape that had left the tape residue that I mentioned. At one point, somebody decided to use duct tape to try to reattach the top of the map to one of the wooden dowels that it previously was attached to via other means. There seemed to have been maybe a wooden dowel on the bottom as well, but that has long since gone missing. So all along the top was adhesive residue left behind by this duct tape. There was also some at the bottom. Somebody had also edged the entirety of the textile backing in tape, seemingly as a support to the dowel. Luckily, in that case, the adhesive residue was isolated just to the textile portion of the map. So once the textile was removed, that wasn't an issue. So that's the initial condition of the map and how it came to us.
So treatment so far of this map, first step we took was to do some testing. We knew we wanted to remove the varnish, so we tested for solubility of the varnish and of the media. That was really exciting because the varnish was soluble in water first go. So we got really excited, but then we noticed that the media was disturbed as we were doing the swabbing. So we tried to find other ways to remove the varnish. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, picture 2, there's a little piece of glass with a little lovely piece of gelatin, the fun stuff that I mentioned earlier. We also tried Evalon and blotter paper that were moistened, and we put them under weight to see if it would use the capillary action to sort of lift up the varnish without disturbing the media. Unfortunately, that was not really effective. So we decided to go forward with the washing. You can see my lovely row of pH adjusted water in picture 3. And then in picture 4, us, as you can see, Sigourney and Tracy patting it down as it's in the bath. And after the first wash, we decided to remove the lining. It came off very easily, and you can see that up in picture 6. And after that, we allowed it, my apologies. We allowed it to dry without weight. We wanted to check to see if the varnish situation had changed. It didn't. So with counsel from the Thomas Upson Archive, we decided to still go forward with removing it, which is the stage we are currently at. And that is picture 7. So you can see we are just painstakingly, I think it's been 4 or 5 days now, just slowly rolling handmade cotton swabs over to gently lift the varnish and to try and keep the media to stay down. It's been great. It's almost like fireside chats. We all sit around the map and swab delicately and talk about life. And so that's the condition of that going forward as of now. And it's been a lovely learning experience. So that's our presentation. We wanted to say thank you to everyone for this incredible opportunity. Thank you to the Friends of Georgia Archives and History. This internship really is incredible for interns like Danny and I. So thank you. Thank you to Sigourney and Tracy for your time, your expertise, your patience. And thank you to the Georgia Archives and its amazing staff. I know COVID's been a really strange time, and we all sort of wave to each other from like 15 feet away, but it's been really nice to come into a place and see people's faces and just say hi to everyone from time to time. I really have enjoyed that as well. And one final note, just remember that tape is bad. And then we will finish it off there.
Thank you.
So if anyone has any questions, or if there are any questions online, we can go there. Okay. Yes? Sure, go ahead.
This was excellent. You did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, going back, Charlotte, going back to the beginning.
Sure.
You said you were on a yacht.
Yes.
And you met a conservator.
Yes.
What was it that conservator shared with you, or said that made you go into this profession?
So I actually had the opportunity to meet 2 conservators in the wild on 2 different vessels that I worked on. The first conservator was a stone, so he worked in stone. He had gone to school in fine arts for sculpture, and I think what fascinated me about his work was his just knowledge of marble. He could look at any type of marble and tell you exactly where it came from in the world, even sometimes the quarry that it actually came from. And so, and his way of working, just seeing him work with it and doing repairs, just really was incredible. And then another time, I worked for a gentleman who had conservators on his staff who took care of all of his private collections, from his library to his photographs to his book, or well, I said library, to his artwork. And they would travel to all of like his properties or wherever they needed to do assessments, and they also worked closely with museums when he would like put things on loan and stuff like that. So I really just got brief conversations, brief encounters, but it clicked because I was always in museums when we were around, and I just knew that that was something I really enjoyed and really wanted to do. So it was almost like I found my calling, so yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no worries.
Danny, I think we watched the same YouTube on
Probably.
Conservative like costumes. So is that something you want to go into? Ideally, would that be your ideal profession, was to help conserve costumes because you're an actor?
Well, yeah, I mean, various aspects of my life have conspired to make that interest of mine. With acting, yeah, the costuming was always fascinating to me. I've been extremely interested in fashion history. I recently took a course in it, and it was just endlessly fascinating how dress differs from different cultures and how it evolves, especially over time. So yeah, for me in particular, costume conservation is sort of the trajectory I'm going towards. So that would be a dream job of mine, yes.
Nothing from online.
Nothing from online.
The Camp History had, about a year ago, had a display. They called it Stitch and Sew. There was a lot of old dresses and stuff like that. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we've learned, I've just being around Danny, I've learned a lot about different historical costumes that I never thought I would know about, but it's definitely a really interesting field, and it's definitely growing. And yeah, our clothes do tell us a lot about ourselves, I think.
I like books like that too, then.
Yeah.
I have several of them. Am I allowed to ask another question? I don't know if the question is, okay, in the journal club, that seemed like really fun. What a great idea.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are there any of the journal articles that really spoke? I know maybe all of them, but really spoke to you.
Should we go back to it?
Yeah, we can go back to that slide. I really enjoyed the article. Our first article actually was chosen by Sigourney because she's the ringleader. So she was like, I'm going to show it the way. She had us read an article about how we've approached different objects in conservation and how our values sort of dictate the way we treat them. So archival material, we're really interested in the information, not necessarily the aesthetics, whereas in a fine arts conservation lab, you're really more concerned about the way things look. And so how does that change the way you approach objects? So for me, yeah, the practice of looking in paper conservation was a really incredible article. I really enjoyed that one. I don't know which one you liked.
I don't know. I found all of them interesting in different ways, discussing sustainability and conservation, which is an extremely prescient issue, especially nowadays. We each picked 2 of these articles. I'll give you 7 guesses which one of them was from me. It's the hint, it's the one that has textile conservator in the title, but I happened to pick that one, the role of connoisseurship in determining the textile conservator's treatment options, because what it really was talking about was how we view the object impacts its treatment of it. So there were different categories that the author created, but things like if it's a religious object or sacred objects, something termed as sacred, that awe-inspiring nature of it makes it so you don't want to intervene as much. You don't want to do as much like active work. So maybe that's more on the side of preventive conservation, housing, just keeping it stable. Versus things like if it's if you're in private conservation and there's, somebody that deals in Navajo rugs and says, I want to sell this Navajo rug, but it's kind of messed up. Can you just fix it up for me so that the value will go up? And so that encourages intervention and restoration of the object. And then just all in between, just how we view objects impacting the way that we interact with them as conservators. So.
Thank you. Is that a wrap?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What are you up to next?
I'll go first. I am going back home to Tallahassee. I have potentially secured a little part-time position in the special collections at the Strozier Library at Florida State. They have some really cool facsimiles of medieval manuscripts and scrapbook collections and fun stuff. So I'll be working with the preservationists potentially there. We do have a conservation lab in Tallahassee. It is very mysterious. I think we have a lot of archaeological sites, so I think it's more ethnographic materials that they have there. I've reached out into the ether and I get to have a lab tour when I come back. So yeah, just really trying to get more involved and get more experience and exposure. And just stay at home with family and enjoy the time I have while I'm still, I guess, home before conservation moves me all around. And yeah, that's what I'll be up to.
Yeah, and I myself will also be returning home to Phoenix. I don't necessarily have anything like an internship opportunity lined up to immediately go to after that. But I have a couple of contacts that I want to reach out to, some possibilities of, at the very least, maybe some mentorship, if not, maybe some opportunities for additional experience. In addition to that, I mean, I'm going to continue to maybe take more courses in things like art history or studio arts to continue gaining hand skills and that sort of thing in different mediums. Continue to do self-study and learn. And my hope is to actually submit an application for grad school, this fall, winter cycle.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah.
I was trying, it's like.
That was the last thing.
Try not to think about that, but
yeah.
yes, apply to grad school.
Apply to grad school, see how it goes. Like we were saying, it's incredibly difficult to be accepted into one of the grad programs. So fingers crossed I'll get accepted on the first try. Probably not, but that's just because I'm up against so many other extremely talented individuals wanting to go into the field. And that just means I got to work harder and learn more and just keep improving and growing. So.
Yes.
I don't know very much about conservation and all that you guys do, but from what I've seen on the film here, looks like you guys have done quite a bit. I know when Tracy and Sigourney came in, Tracy was a newbie. She was over there just working. She worked hard. And she would come, I would go in and she would show me the work that she was doing. And, we can really appreciate people that have the time and the energy that you young people have to do these things.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to you guys.
Oh, thank you.
For what you're going to do next.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Annette.
Yeah.
In a similar vein, congratulations, thank you, good luck. And thanks again for all your great work on the Bible workshop.
Yes, I really had fun with the Bible workshop.
That without you, so
Oh,
yeah.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
It was really interesting. Perfect. Anyone else? Well, thank you, everyone. And really, thank you for making our time here so special. It really has been fun.
Yes,
So.
thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to give a last thank you to the two of you and your wonderful work and how much you have helped us at the archives. We managed to get through quite a bit of work with you, and we're happy to tick off those things. So thank you very much. And we are so excited to see where you go next and how your future will just grow. So
Thank you
very
Sigourney.
much, and thank you everyone for attending.